12-year-old Micah had never held more than 3 copper coins in his entire life, so when he found a heavy leather bag filled with gold beside an abandoned well, his first thought was not that he had become rich. His first thought was that his mother might live. For weeks, Mara had been lying on a thin mat inside their tiny stone house, burning with fever and struggling to breathe. The healer had medicine that could help her, but Micah had no money left. Their landlord had already warned him, "Pay what you owe by sunrise tomorrow, or both of you will be put into the street." Micah had spent that morning searching the hills for dry wood he could sell when he noticed fresh footprints near the old well. Something dark was half buried beneath loose stones. He pulled it free and heard coins strike one another inside. When he opened the bag, golden light reflected across his face. There were more coins than he could count without starting over. Enough for medicine. Enough for food. Enough to pay the rent for years. Enough to make sure his mother never had to fear another winter. Micah looked around the empty road. No one had seen him. He tied the bag beneath his tunic and ran home. Mara was asleep when he entered. He placed the gold beneath a loose stone near the wall and sat beside her, imagining the healer arriving with medicine and the landlord suddenly speaking to them with respect. For the first time in months, Micah felt hope. But before sunset, shouting filled the village. People hurried toward the market square, where Roman guards had forced an elderly man named Tobiah onto his knees. Tobiah was a quiet carpenter who repaired broken doors and farming tools for families who could not afford to pay him. Beside the guards stood Cassiel, the village tax collector, dressed in expensive robes with rings on his fingers. His assistant Silas held a ledger against his chest. Cassiel raised his voice so everyone could hear. "A bag containing 100 gold coins disappeared from my office this morning. This man was seen near the building shortly before it vanished." Tobiah shook his head. "I went there to dispute a false tax placed on my daughter's home. I took nothing." Silas stepped forward and said, "He threatened us before he left. Who else could have stolen it?" The crowd began whispering. Tobiah had argued publicly with Cassiel many times because the tax collector often demanded more from poor families than they owed. Cassiel looked down at the old man and smiled coldly. "If the gold is not returned by sunrise, your home will be seized, and you will spend the rest of your life working in the stone quarry." A little girl pushed through the crowd and ran toward Tobiah. Her name was Hannah, his granddaughter. A guard held her back while she cried, "My grandfather would never steal!" Micah stood near the edge of the crowd, feeling the hidden gold grow heavier beneath his memory. He could end this with one sentence. But if he returned the bag, his mother might die. If he remained silent, Tobiah would lose everything. That evening, Micah went to the healer's house and asked how much the medicine would cost. The healer named a price greater than anything Micah could earn in a year. Micah reached beneath his tunic but stopped before revealing the gold. "Can you wait until tomorrow?" he asked. The healer shook his head. "Your mother may not have until tomorrow." Micah ran home, pulled the bag from beneath the stone, and placed it on the floor. He counted the coins again and again. 99 pieces of gold. Taking one would hardly be noticed, he told himself. He could return the rest and still buy the medicine. But the moment he reached into the bag, someone knocked on the door. Micah quickly covered the gold with a blanket. When he opened the door, Jesus stood outside. Micah had seen him earlier near the market, surrounded by people asking for help. Jesus looked tired from the road, but his eyes were calm. "May I come in?" he asked. Micah stepped aside. Jesus entered and looked toward Mara, who was breathing weakly on the mat. Then he looked at the covered bag on the floor. Micah's face went pale. "I did not steal it," he said immediately. Jesus sat beside him. "I know." Micah's eyes filled with tears. He told Jesus everything. The well, the gold, the healer, the landlord, and Tobiah waiting to be punished at sunrise. When he finished, he asked, "What am I supposed to do? If I return it, my mother could die. If I keep it, an innocent man will suffer. Tell me which life matters more." Jesus did not give him an answer. Instead, he asked, "What do you believe the gold will save?" Micah looked toward his mother. "Her life, our home, everything," Jesus nodded. "And what will your silence cost?" Micah lowered his head. "Tobiah's life." Jesus stood and said, "Come with me!" They walked through the dark village until they reached Tobiah's small house. Hannah was sitting outside the locked door with her grandfather's old cloak wrapped around her shoulders. She had nowhere else to go. When she saw Jesus, she wiped her eyes and said, "They took my grandfather because he tried to protect us. My father died last year, and my mother works far away. He is all I have." Micah could not look at her. Hannah continued, "Last winter, when I was sick, grandfather sold his tools to buy my medicine. He said tools could be replaced, but I could not." Micah felt as though the words had been spoken directly into the part of him trying to justify keeping the gold. Jesus did not shame him. He simply stood beside him in silence. When Micah returned home, Mara was awake. She saw the bag and understood immediately that something was wrong. Micah told her the truth. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she reached for his hand and whispered, "Your father once told me that hunger can empty a house, but dishonesty empties the person living inside it." Micah began to cry. "But I could lose you." Mara touched his face. "And if you save me by destroying an innocent man, you will lose part of yourself." Before dawn, the entire village gathered in the market square. Tobiah was brought forward with his hands tied. Cassiel stood beside a table while Silas opened the official ledger. Just as the guards prepared to take Tobiah away, Micah stepped from the crowd carrying the leather bag. "He did not steal it," the boy shouted. "I found it beside the abandoned well." Gasps moved through the square. Cassiel snatched the bag and poured the coins across the table. He counted them slowly, then looked at Micah. 99. Micah froze. Cassiel's expression hardened. "There were 100. You kept one." "No," Micah said. "That is all that was inside." Silas pointed toward Tobiah. "The old man must have taken one before hiding the bag. The boy probably found what remained." Cassiel smiled as if the truth had finally become convenient. "Then both of them are guilty." Jesus stepped forward from the crowd. "Who counted the coins before the bag disappeared?" Cassiel answered. "Silas did. He records every payment." Jesus looked at the assistant. "And who sealed the bag?" Silas swallowed. "I did." Jesus walked toward the table and examined the coins. Then he looked at Silas's right hand, which had remained closed since Micah arrived. "Open your hand." Silas laughed nervously. "You have no authority to command me." Jesus repeated, "Open your hand." The square became silent. Silas slowly raised his hand but kept his fingers clenched. A guard reached toward him, and Silas stepped back. As he did, something slipped from the torn lining of his sleeve and struck the stone floor. A single gold coin spun in a circle beneath the morning light. Cassiel stared at it. On its edge was the small triangular mark used only on coins stored in his private treasury. Silas tried to run, but the guards seized him. Under questioning, he confessed that he had taken one coin, hidden the remaining bag near the well, and planned to retrieve it after Tobiah had been blamed. He had chosen Tobiah because the old man had threatened to expose the false taxes written in Silas's ledger. Tobiah was released. Cassiel's records were taken for investigation, and several families later received land and money that had been stolen from them through false debts. But Micah still had no medicine for his mother. As the crowd began to leave, Tobiah approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You returned enough gold to live like a prince," the old man said. "Why?" Micah looked at Hannah standing beside him and answered, "Because keeping it would have made someone else pay for my hope." Tobiah took Micah to his workshop and opened a wooden chest containing the money villagers had paid him over many years. It was not much, but others who had witnessed Micah's courage began adding what they could. A farmer gave 2 silver coins. A merchant gave 5. Even the healer stepped forward and said he would provide the medicine without taking payment until Mara recovered. By sunset, Micah's mother had received treatment. The landlord's debt had been paid, and Tobiah had offered them a room beside his workshop for as long as they needed it. That evening, Micah found Jesus preparing to leave the village. "I thought returning the gold would cost me everything," the boy said. Jesus looked back toward the small house where Mara was resting safely. "Sometimes doing what is right closes the door you hoped would save you," he replied. "But it opens hearts you never knew were watching." Micah asked, "Did you know the missing coin was in Silas's sleeve?" Jesus smiled gently. I knew the truth was making his hand heavier than the gold. Years later, Micah became known throughout the region as a man who could be trusted with anything: money, secrets, even lives. But whenever people praised his honesty, he always remembered the night when he had sat beside a bag of gold and believed he had to choose between saving his mother and saving his soul. In the end, he learned that the right choice did not make his life easier immediately. It simply made it possible for goodness to find him.